Hello friends, welcome to my romance era. This is the first of 5 videos this week where I explore 25 plus romance novels. Don't worry, I'm not overloading myself on the genre. I'm doing it in a safe and controlled environment, sprinkling in romance novels between other things over the next 20 weeks before you're seeing this video. It's currently summer, and it just feels like the right season to kick this off. I have very limited experience with adult romance. The ones I've enjoyed, I would barely even consider romance, or at least that's not the element that I enjoyed the most within them. I'll let Kayla day 2, 3, and 4 talk about like preconceived notions, trope preferences, judgments that I might have. Day 1 Kayla is open-minded and logical. Here are some questions that I want answered for myself by the end of this series. The first is, can I love adult romance? The next is like, what kind of romance do I enjoy? Is it the lighter or the darker? The spice or the sugar? The rom-coms or the smut? Something else I'm interested in is, are the tropes that I already enjoy in romance as B-plot books, are those the same tropes that I will enjoy within romance as A-plot books? But the one question we'll be able to answer by the end of today is, if there are authors in other genres and I've given 5 stars to them, will I enjoy their romance books? So what I put together is a TBR for this video of just that. 5 authors who I've read from in other capacities and I've given them 5 stars, and I'm picking up romance from them. You'd think that this would be a more common occurrence on my shelves. It's not. There was only like 5 to 7 to even choose from. So these aren't really hand selected by me, they're selected by statistics. The first book I have on my list is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akweke Emezi. I've read from this author 4 separate times. I think my favorite has been The Death of Vivek Oji. I just love how this author dips into so many different like genres and age ranges. So this was a pretty easy pick. I almost wanted to save it until the Goodreads video, which is coming at the end of the week, because I'm assuming it's going to be pretty high on the list of Goodreads romance at the end of the year. With that said, I don't know anything about this book because I don't consume romance content. I actually don't know the plot of like any of these books. What I've heard is just that this is people's favorite romance of the year and that everyone is in love with the love interest in here. And I think that brings up another question for me. This might sound stupid, but does a romance for a lot of people hinge on an almost self-insertion aspect? Do you have to enjoy the love interest? Do they have aspects of their personality that you find attractive in a partner for yourself? Or can I enjoy it the same, just accepting that they're good for each other? Can I also enjoy a romance if I don't think they're good for each other? My number 2 pick is Fool Me Once by Ashley Winstead. I love In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. It's a 5-star mystery thriller for me. And there are romantic, sexual kind of elements in here, which made me think this could be something that's enjoyable. Again, don't know the plot, but we will discover it together as soon as I start reading. Author number 3 is going to be Sandhya Menon. I adore When Dimple Met Rishi, and not just for the romance elements, but also just Dimple I found to be a really relatable character. The YA romance that I've enjoyed, I think a lot of them have an equal balance of like real life stuff and romance stuff. And I'm assuming that's going to be something important to me in this genre as well. So I'm thinking like the tech element, the STEM element maybe is something that these share. In the Sizzle Paradox, where she's writing as Lily Manon, I believe our main character is having a very logical and analytical look at who she should be with. Book number 4 is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. I love Girl Made of Stars. This is one of my favorite like hard-hitting YA contemporaries. There are some relationship dynamics explored in here. I don't really remember how much, if any, like romance exists, but I thought this would be a really good pick. All I've heard about this is one of them is a mom, one of them is a photographer, or maybe one person is both of those things. I actually didn't realize this was a 2022 release, so this might also end up in the awards. And then lastly, of course, we are throwing an Emily Henry in here. It's so funny because when I first joined Book Talk, one of the first videos I ever saw was talking about beach read. And at this point, Emily Henry had only had 2 adult romance novels, but I have been reading from Emily Henry for years. I was one of her like first ARC readers. I've been talking about her, promoting her books since the beginning. And I saw this TikTok that popped up and it was like, I'm gonna tell you which Emily Henry to start with. And I was like, oh my gosh, as an introduction to Book Talk, this is so fun. Like, let's talk about all of her books. And then the video was like 15 seconds long and it went, I recommend you start with beach read, but you could also start with People on Vacation or read them in the other order, and the video was over. And I was like, hold on, the book talk girlies don't know about Emily Henry? Because A Million Junes was one of my favorite books. I've read all of her YA things. This is the current highest rated for me. And this is one of the most like romance-centric books that I have read. It's Romeo and Juliet, it's very angsty, a little bit of magic, a very fun time. So I thought Beach Read would be a great place to start. It's super hyped, so many people love it. People have been recommending it to me for so long. All I know about it is we have two authors, they don't like each other, and then they give each other a challenge to write each other's genre for the weekend, for a month, for the summer. I have no idea. So I thought it'd be really fun to kick off my romance era here with authors that I am familiar with, plots that I'm not so much, but we'll discover all of that together. I'm sure there will be a ton of conversations that I'm going to want to have throughout this vlog, and I'll check back in with you when I've selected what my first read will be. The book I'm going to start with, it's actually really fun because I'm currently filming a secret TBR that at this point I've already posted, you've already seen, and reading this selected TBR to complete my own reading challenge. But the whole thing is I'm reading titles with book related words in them. So we've got stories, we have notes, we have book. And behind the scenes, like little do you know, at the time I'm also going to be reading Beach Read for this challenge. But you won't know that until this video goes live like 5 months later. As it's currently still summer, I am gonna take this to the beach with me and start it in the perfect environment. Okay, we actually decided to come to the pool instead of go to the beach. I still feel like this is a good pick for this scenario. Me and my giant unicorn, we're gonna float around. Liam's fine, don't worry. I'm gonna try to read this floating on my unicorn. What could go wrong? I feel like Grumpy Sunshine is a dynamic that I like, but this has like grumpy vibes, and she's like calling it out herself. So we have this woman who's going to stay at her dad's, her dead dad's like secret cabin on the lake, and there's a neighbor who's annoying, and she's like, he's grumpy, but I'm grumpy too, so I should probably leave him alone. And basically she's writing like her 5th book, and she isn't finding a lot of inspiration. And then she runs into this guy. Oh my god. Then it turns out her neighbor she actually knows because they went to school together. And I just like being there for the beginning of relationships. Like, I don't want to hear about 20 years ago how you saw each other across the room and you made out one night and then 20 years later there's another opportunity to be together. That's better for me than the like we dated for a long period and I miss all of that as a reader, and then 10 years later they reconnect. So at least they didn't have like a super full out romance. There was just some little bit of interest. Also, there's something I really like about books about authors, because there's always some level of self-insertion, or what you can assume as self-insertion from the author. Like in Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, there's talk about how like she was writing for so long before one of her books took off, and now like that's the only book that people want to talk about when they interview her, even though she's written other things. And that just feels like authentic to her experience. And then another Emily, she's going into like a bookstore and she's like, I am an author, can I sign some books? And the bookseller says, okay, let me go check if we have your book. And the author in here, January, is like, people always assume I only have one book. And it almost feels like they think that I'm not qualified to be an established author and that my success was just a one-time fluke. And I just think that's interesting, and maybe like inspired by her own experiences, who knows? She's just getting into some funny antics now. She got invited to like a book club and it wasn't exactly what she expected, and the other guy is also there. I'm having a good time with it so far, and the romance hasn't even really been introduced, so I'm really glad that this is what are you doing?
That better?
I told Rob if he was gonna float around in the background, he couldn't be angrily squinting trying to see. I just don't want him to think you're angrily swimming and waiting for me to join you. I saved a bee's life and now they're watching him. Anyway, I've gotten to the point in the story now. I'm like 50% through. I am obsessed. And I'm at the point where like some things are going on between them, and their banter is out of this world. So I'm in the final stretch and I've hit the point that most romances hit for me when they lose me. And that is at the tone shift. Naturally, I'm feeling a little bit bummed because I'm not enjoying it the same way that I was, but I'm excited that I get to talk through some things like this with you. My limited experience in romance, something that I've talked about before, is when a book starts out with a certain tone and then it turns into, in this case, the more sentimental. But it also happens when a romance book kicks off sentimental and like super sweeping romance, and then it turns into like drama and angst and conflict between the romantic relationship. So with this book and other romance I've read, it starts out with like witty banter and a really fun dynamic. And then this isn't a flaw with the genre, it's just me as a reader. I want it to continue being fun. And I feel like what happens a lot is, especially the love interest, especially when it's a man, he loses his entire personality throughout a romance book. And again, I don't think this is a flaw. I think this is oftentimes what people are looking for in this type of story, is that like the main character is breaking down his walls and is finally getting to see the real him, and everything else was like a front. The reason he was funny and sarcastic and kind of on guard was because he doesn't know how to be vulnerable, and she makes him open up, and that's something that people enjoy. And I get that, and I also get that books of this length, they can't be the same tone throughout the entire thing. People have to change and grow, and like that is the point, and I get it. But everything that I was liking about him, it's like shifted into this romantic, sentimental man who has all of these big poetic statements he wants to make, and like that's authentic to his character because he is a writer, and that's obviously what January needs. Is she needs someone who's going to make a big romantic effort for her and make her feel valuable and worthy, and I understand it all, but it loses me because obviously while their relationship is evolving and they are adults and they need to have more serious conversations and really mean a lot to each other, I miss the fun. Okay, I think what feels right to me here is 3.75. Pretty high, which is great. Like, this was a success. I already knew I liked books about authors, and I think it was really smart to not include too much of the stories that each respective author were writing in here, because that definitely could have been an element and it might have bogged it down. There were definitely some other things to care about outside of the relationship, the career itself, writing a new book, having writer's block. Also, there was a little bit of like research and interviewing various people for their books, which was an interesting element. It's not exactly what I thought it would be when we're talking about two authors taking on each other's genres. I thought there would be more of them meeting up and discussing like, how do you craft a happily ever after? Like, how would you build this scene of dialogue in this genre versus this genre? More of like the craft of writing I thought would be a part of this. And I'm hoping that one of the Goodreads nominees happens to be The Roughest Draft. I accidentally reserved this. I meant to change the delivery date to winter in case that ended up being something I needed to read for the Goodreads video. But I've heard a lot of things about The Roughest Draft and how it takes this same idea and does it so differently, and now I'm just so curious what that means. There was also a lot of plot regarding her family dynamics, the things that she learned about her parents throughout the story. I do have a few gripes about the ending, the series of letters that we were reading. There were a couple things I found a little too sentimental, and a lot of messages in here are quite heavy-handed, but I definitely had a lot of fun with it. There are like little field trips that they go on to teach each other about how to get into the mind of a certain type of author, and it was fun. So, all right, moving on to book number 2. Today we're at a drive-in. We have about an hour wait until the movie starts. We're seeing Top Gun and Grease. I actually had somebody, I talked about in a vlog that someone needed to remind me before the summer was up that I wanted to go to the drive-in, and then somebody just commented it. And then I looked at the website and the movie that I wanted to see was playing, and then Grease. So I'm gonna start Fool Me Once, which is about a woman who works at a woman-run electric car company, and then she ends up having to work with a guy that she dated back in high school or college, so I think it's a second chance romance, but I really trust Ashley Winstead, so we'll see how it goes. Rob trying to get a good Instagram shot for me. Yeah, just hold it right there. A little to the left. Up, 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 way up. Oh yeah. So far I'm I'm really liking the main character. I feel like she is experienced, which doesn't like make or break a main character for me. Obviously every experience level is valid to have in a story, but I do like following a character who isn't experiencing like everything for the first time with the romantic interest. Like she starts out the book leaving a hotel room with a guy and says that it's a pretty normal thing for her to like sneak out, and then she's like running through Disneyland dressed as one of the Disney princesses because she's attending a wedding and critiquing like the bride. And then she gets a phone call from her boss telling her that she's going to be working with this guy. She's like, oh my god, I know that guy, but she obviously doesn't want anyone at her company knowing that. So that's the kickoff. We're gonna watch the movie and then I'll come back to you.
Snacks to nibble. A gay, pleasant evening for all.
Our drive-in date was fantastic. Thank you for asking. I'm gonna finish this today and I'm 140 pages in. So basically what's going on in here, she cheated on her boyfriend back in the day and now he is working kind of with her. He's made it no secret that he hates her, so when he shows up in the boardroom, she automatically assumes he's there to sabotage her. But then she finds out they actually have the same goal, to get this certain environmental green bill passed, and they need to convince a bunch of senators. He's showing up to kind of steal her thunder and take all of the credit for what she's doing. Not taking credit for what she's already done. He actually, I think, is supposed to seem like a good guy to us, and so far he does, but is more so turning it into like a game and a competition with her, and is just like teaming up with her, and then is going to take the credit for all the senators that they convinced together, and then he might take that like senior role that she has been working towards. That's all fine and good. I'm interested in the workplace dynamics. I like their back and forth. I really like the main character. Her name's Lee Stone. She goes by Stoner. The love interest is Ben. There is something stopping them from being together, so I think it's going to be a slower burn. An unexpected hurdle for me is trying to stop thinking about how the author is trying to make me feel. If this was written in third person, I feel like this would be less of an issue for me, but it's in first person, and while Lee has her flaws, and I feel like Ben coming into her life has created chaos. It's getting a little bit silly. It's feeling like a rom-com when a bunch of characters go to a restaurant and like all of their exes show up and then a fight breaks out. The way that we understand her to be in business is extremely capable and intelligent. And because it's written in first person, we're getting a very good idea of who this person believes her to be. So when she does stupid things, as far as business goes, personal life, she's a wreck, but business things, it just feels so obvious to me when the author is just like, okay, well, I need to make Ben seem smart and capable and like he's saving Lee, but in a subtle way. But the scene that's going down, she could have handled herself. It's like she'll start out a scene with a very clear intent. Okay, so like they just went to this rodeo and she read a whole book about like a guide to cattle roping or whatever, so she could integrate herself into the minds of these men and she can get intel on this senator. She has all of these big plans, so she's there and she's doing it. And then in the middle of a conversation, one of the guys will be like, oh, this must be your first time here. And she's like, oh yeah, we'll follow your lead. Meanwhile, like the whole point is that she was pretending to know all about it so she could get along with these men. And so in the middle of her admitting she knows nothing about it, which like, why would she ever do that? Ben swoops in and he's like, oh no, we've been here before. Like, we know all about it. Haha, charming, charming guy. And I get it in terms of the romance because we need to see Ben as this like power figure. And I feel like it's supposed to give Lee a man to kind of guide her in one portion of life, because in everything else, she's so capable and so smart. But you can't make me understand her to be a certain way, especially from her own perspective, and then make her flop like multiple times just so he can swoop in and do something impressive. Something I've already learned about myself in this experiment is I do prefer first person over third person in romance. But if it was in third person, we could have like seen her in a certain way, but then also understood that she doesn't see herself that way yet. And so they're like dueling personality traits. But when she's telling us everything about herself and she knows she could have handled these scenarios without him, it's overwhelming how much the author is pushing something as opposed to it feeling natural. It all sounds so stupid. I'm just like, I'm reading a silly little rom-com. I wouldn't be overthinking it this way if it was a movie. I already know that. Okay, I finished it. Every 50 pages would go by and I'd be like, I should check in with the people I should let them know I think this is going to be a 5-star. Also slightly debating with myself of lying and saying it's not a 5-star, so I feel like this romance series still has purpose. I closed this book and I thought, that was so good, but is this my perfect romance? No, it's not. So it can't be 5 stars. And then I was contemplating and I was like, so every book that I give 5 stars, I consider like my perfect horror, my perfect thriller? No, this was definitely 5 stars. Like, I can't deny it. It was 5 stars. I'm so happy. And I truly think that there is a statistical answer to my perfect romance. How many pages before we get this type of scene? How many pages they spend together before this happens? And I do think my perfect romance also has a decent chunk of time at the end where they are just together and happy. Can I also put forth a petition that every romance book has a dream sequence of a sex scene? Because I just think it's really smart how the author gave us that little teaser moment of even like how explicit the language is going to be and the scenes are going to be in the book. As someone who gets the ick very easily, I appreciated knowing the type of language and cringe level we were going to experience, which was like 0. We also had the there's only one bed trope. Lived for it. With all of that said, I think that some people will struggle with this main character. She is very bold with her opinions, always says what she's thinking, is very honest. Anyway, I'll see you when I start my next read. I have a 5-star. It's a success. Me and romance. Still looking for my perfect one though. So I'll see you soon. I guess now with a 5-star under my belt, the pressure is gone and I can just have fun. The stakes are low, which isn't the case necessarily with this story. This is the type of romance that I would definitely put higher on my list of hesitant to read. And that's because there's a child involved. One of these women has, I think it's a 12-year-old daughter. When you include like family stuff, I just feel like there's so much pressure on the relationship. I'm really excited to get into this because I love books about weddings. She is a photographer. She's coming back to her small town. They're going to interact, fall in love. I don't know, but there is a whole series to read, which is fun, and I hope that I like it. I am 100 pages in, so first impressions are really good. We're in third person, but we're getting clear defined chapters from each woman's perspective. Delilah and Claire like kind of knew each other in high school because Claire is friends with Delilah's stepsister, who's the wedding that's going on. But they like didn't really know each other, didn't get along. Delilah was just like this weird stepsister who was like kind of goth and lurky. This group of girls that kind of made fun of her. So when Claire approaches her at the bar, because Claire is tasked with like getting someone's number by the end of the night by her friend, she goes and flirts with Delilah, not recognizing her, and Delilah kind of goes along with it even though she definitely recognizes Claire. But she got found out very quickly because Astrid showed up at the bar. Not only do I like wedding books, but I like kind of a countdown to a big event. So they're together for like 2 weeks leading up to the wedding. But Delilah also just got an opportunity back in like New York City at a photography exhibit, but by the time she gets back, she's only going to have like 3 days to get together a bunch of pieces to put in like this gallery. And that's stressing me out, and I feel like if it were me, I would find little moments, because like she has camera equipment and whatnot with her, like I would try to find some opportunities in between all of the wedding stuff to like do some photography in the small town somehow, just like figure something out, because I'm gonna be thinking about this exhibit for the next like couple hundred pages. There's a lot of very fun banter between these two, so having a good time. 3/4 of the way through this book, and I would like to acknowledge very quickly that I'm slowly realizing that this vlog series is not useful to anybody. A, I don't know what you want to know in a romance review. I don't know what you care about. And B, I feel like I'm going to consistently talk about the things that I don't like, even if I'm liking the book, because this feels like a 4-star, and it is more valuable to me to figure out what I don't. So one thing to note is the same with cozy mysteries is I love hearing about people's jobs, and I can't explain why. I'm nosy. I want more of people's workplace dynamics. And I say this about so many lighter books that I feel like the intention is like so much escapism. And so the author doesn't want to talk about their jobs, but like I want to hear about it. Claire owns a bookstore. And I want a little bit of like mundane activities of like stocking the shelves, talking about what it's like to run a bookshop. I want her to talk about like the rush of like getting a box of really good books and being able to recommend something to somebody that really means something to them. But that's not what the story's about at all. And so that's not fair of me to say, but we're getting none of her and her bookstore. Now let me tell you something I am liking. Every single scene, I know exactly what these women look like, what they're wearing, what their hair looks like that day, and I love that. Because I just, before this, read a book that didn't do that, and I was actually thinking about it while reading the book, but I didn't think it was valuable enough to talk about. But that is something that was bugging me, as I was like, this is a whole cast of women, and I never know what they're wearing or how they styled their hair that day. But this is doing that for me. I know what Claire looks like every time she enters a room. Another thing I'm not liking though isn't this book specific, but it is fun to pinpoint something in romance that I'm not looking for. And it's when a sensual, sexual scene happens immediately after someone is crying. And it may sound stupid, but it's happened in here 3 times where one of these women is like bawling her eyes out, and then I get it because like she's being comforted and it turns into kissing, like, which might be normal for other people, but I'm just having a really hard time getting into those scenes and being fully invested when they're like, she has a tear-streaked face while they're getting it on. Great news for me, it was 4 stars. Bad news for this week of vlogs, because I feel like, should we just stop the video series here? I've already found some wins, and I've already figured out that like the main question of this video, will I enjoy authors that I've enjoyed before? It's a yes. This is the answer. Reading romance books from established authors. The relationship is what you're rooting for the entire time. You care deeply about both women, or at least the intent of the book is that you care about both women, you care about their relationship together, and you care about them as individuals. And we've really spent a lot of time with them individually working through their own pasts. I think the length of this is definitely warranted. We're coming close to 400 pages, and I at no point was uninterested. I wouldn't call it like quite rom-com territory, like I wasn't laughing, but it wasn't super serious. But I wish that she had taken things more seriously with her gallery thing, and I'm not gonna get over it. And here's what I wish this book would have done. And this is definitely coming from my history, my deep history with like YA. Maybe this is a young, silly gimmick, but I really like books that have a creative intro to like each chapter, especially if we have a character who is so art focused. Like I wish the art had taken us through the book. So something as simple as and since you've been gone, the chapters are the list of things that she's trying to accomplish throughout the book. So like 6, Kiss a Stranger, and then you know what's going to happen in that chapter. And then like The Sky is Everywhere, each chapter begins with the series of notes that have been found in the forest. In Why We Broke Up, it's told through a series of drawings that reference like the items that meant something to them in their relationship. And in I'll Give You the Sun, there's a series of portraits because we have a main character who is making art, and it'll occasionally say self-portrait, throwing armfuls of air into the air. Because she's building a gallery of 10 photographs that we never like, she doesn't really talk about. There is a little bit of an impact with like one of the pieces, but I feel like it just would have been really fun for each chapter or like section of the book, even just a simple quote that described the photograph that was going to be entered into this gallery. There was one specific scene where she's going through a box of old stuff and she finds old letters, and I was like, oh, she's gonna find one of her first photographs and she's gonna enter it into this gallery, so you really see her like progression as an artist. And then it just never happened, and I was like, what a missed opportunity to talk about the art throughout the book. Anyway, I got distracted. What was I saying? The balance. There was a balance between them as a couple, their friends, them spending time together. Like we really got them together for a lengthy period, which is what I want in a romance. There was probably like 6 sex scenes throughout it. I don't know if that's weird to talk about, but I also think that was a good amount, if not like a little bit much. And then the third act conflict didn't just involve them. There was like a whole group of people, and there was tension amongst like a lot of people. And I just find that I enjoy that more than just this like silly thrown in like miscommunication that derails their relationship for 40 pages for no reason. Everything felt really believable. Everything made sense. The progression of all of these relationships, they were reasonable, and I thought it was really well done. I could have enjoyed myself more. Like, I wanted to have more fun, I think, throughout, but I think the novel accomplished everything it set out to do, and so it gets a 4. Next is The Sizzle Paradox by Lily Manon. It is fall, but it looks a lot like winter out here. It's starting to snow, and my plan for today was to go on a nice fall walk and show you some scenery and just exist outside and listen to the audiobook, because this has dual perspective and the audiobook has 2 different narrators, which I thought would be fun. But now it's snowing. But I'm not gonna let that ruin my fall walk. What is gonna ruin my walk is, I forgot my headphones. So I'm just gonna listen to it out loud on my phone. Hopefully nothing explicit happens. But like, who's really gonna be out? It's snowing. I just read the first couple chapters and it seems to be friends to lovers. So our main character's name is Lyric, and she's working on her doctorate thesis in like romantic and sexual chemistry, and there's all this neurological conversation that's already happening. And she has this thing called the Sizzle Paradox, which she like ranks every kiss, every sexual encounter she has, every attraction that she feels, and then tries to find like the right relationship, or like all of the successful relationships. What do they have in common? What are they doing correctly? I guess I thought it was going to be about meeting this guy and her setting him up to like do the science stuff, but then she falls for him. But I guess it's her roommate, Kian, who we're also getting his perspective. And the book kicks off with him like kind of seeming attracted to her already. She has no idea, has no interest in him right now. And it's already been a lot. They have both had like romantic encounters with other people. They like went to Target together, both left with other people, went on dates, and we got to hear about both of them. And they were just like ridiculous, the ways that these people behaved. This feels like it was written by somebody who's never been on a date. I know that to not be true, so it's not offensive, right? But just the way these people were talking, I'm assuming it's meant to be set up as like nobody can compare to these roommates and best friends who are eventually going to get together. So every side character and romantic interest is going to have to be like obnoxious or cringy, so I have to get used to that. I think the audiobook will help me get through it. Keep in mind, when I read Dimple Met Rishi, it was back in like 2017, so potentially if I reread that, I would find it equally like weird and cringy. Anyway, need to go get a hot drink, put on a coat, and continue in that. Oh my god, this coat is a total win. I have this pocket right here, and I can play the audiobook, and it's basically right next to my ear.
Chapter 5. Lyric. The guy in my bed is under the covers, down between my legs. Oh my god. My eyes close, every nerve ending in my body focusing on the pleasure emanating from that one point. Lyric, you taste so fucking good. He picks up the pace, his tongue circling my...
I was kidding. I didn't think there would actually be that explicit of a scene 5 chapters in. Okay, I've yet to see anybody. I'm a couple more chapters in, and that scene was actually a dream, which really worked for me. In concept, I love it. Pull for the plane. At this point, Kian and Lyric are making a deal, and it's kind of fake dating, so they're gonna go on a series of dates, and he's gonna teach her about things because she's really insecure that the work that she's doing, she doesn't have any like personal experience with equally having the emotional and the sexual chemistry with somebody. So he's gonna help her out because he's dated like 40 different girls this year, and he is scared of commitment. What I'm not liking is like the over explanation of everything. So she like sits down to coffee and her friend calls her Ducky, and her internal thoughts are like, that's my nickname. My friend calls me that because we're friends. And then instead of just telling us what her project is about at school, she has her like professor basically tell us. So he's like, Lyric, aren't you working on that project where da 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 da? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, remember last year when da 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 da? And she's like, uh-huh. And he's like, okay, well make sure by the end of this semester you do this and this and this and this. She obviously already knows that, and it's for our benefit, but it's just like a little overwritten, I think. I'm headed back home now. I'm halfway through, almost. And I want to be liking this so much more than I am. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced of their deep, long friendship. I'm not convinced of their personalities. Like, Lyric is this super socially awkward girl. Kian is this ladies' man that every girl is just fawning over. I don't see any of it. The book is trying to make me see it. It is giving like different scenarios where they are exuding these personality traits, kind of, but I'm not convinced. My final rating is a 2.5. I feel like I could talk about it in two different ways. What I feel like didn't work for it as a book and what didn't work for me. I think as a book, it needed to up the steam and lower the age. These people just did not act like scientists who are supposedly 24 and 28 respectively, which I just realized means when she was 16 and talking about how she was like so advanced and got into this program, he was 20 when they became best friends. And maybe like that explains why she hasn't really developed in any other aspects of life, because she was just so close with this one friend and it happened so young and that was all she ever had. But like, this girl is lacking in so much friendship that I would expect her to have at this age, life experience. I get that she's busy and at school, but like even her relationship with like any of her classmates, any teachers, it just didn't feel like she has been doing this for 8 years. For me, I was missing the fun. If you're gonna have a fake relationship and you're talking about all the things you're gonna get tutored on, I want there to be a list. I want you to be talking about the things that you are learning throughout the story. I don't want on the first date for you to go to the same place you always go, and then the first time you touch, like you suddenly have feelings, and then the rest of the book is just 200 pages of talking yourself out of wanting this relationship. The next thing I'm going to say isn't about this book specifically, but I have read the same ending like 8 times at this point. I don't understand why all of these romance books end the exact same way. And I don't get how it's supposed to be satisfying as a reader. It's just what I'm looking for in romance is different. I don't want the end of the book to be the beginning of their love story. Like, I want to see these people together and happy for a while, not in an epilogue. Second issue, the number of times these romance books I'm reading are referred to as hilarious and rom-coms and laugh out loud. I don't understand. I'm just lost in finding any semblance of humor in here just because you say the characters chuckled 20 times in one scene doesn't make me laugh. What I did like is the idea of Lyric's journey and her going through school and being so capable and so smart, but questioning her validity as like a student and a professional and feeling like a fraud because she's talking about these things that she herself can't relate to. And while I think the depiction of grad school and the research that she feels like she has to be a part of, some of it doesn't really check out to me. We did spend a good amount of time with Lyric's internal feelings and thoughts and development as a character. And what I appreciate most is that I picked a book that doesn't get too dark and intense. It was relatively light the whole time, but that still doesn't make it a rom-com. The rom was fine, need a little more calm. But regarding the rom, I need a little more tension. And most times it seems with Friends to Lovers, it doesn't seem like the tension that I'm looking for is there. But I'm not gonna write off Friends to Lovers completely, and not based on like this book. So that's that. One more to go. I can't believe it's finally time to read the last book of the video. So, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwe Emezi is on the docket today. Oh gosh, and the synopsis is very intense right off the bat. It's been 5 years since the accident that killed the love of Feyi Adekola's life, and she's almost a new person now, an artist with her own studio and sharing an apartment with her best friend. A steamy encounter at a party cascades into a whirlwind summer, a luxury trip to a tropical island, decadent meals in the home of a celebrity chef, and a major curator who wants to launch her art career. This new life just got a lot more complicated, and Feyi must begin her search for answers. Who is she ready to become? Can she honor her grief while still embracing her future? How far is she willing to go for a second chance at love? This might be one of those books that's more about a character's personal journey, especially when you just see one person on the cover instead of two, and the other person's name doesn't even show up in the synopsis. But this was in fact in the Goodreads Choice Awards. It didn't make the top 10, but it was in the top 20. So I think it is definitively romance, and I'm excited to see how I feel about the romantic encounter she's going to have, who the person is, and to just get a vibe. I'm excited that it's snowing and I get to read something set in a tropical place. Let me check in with you at the 50-page mark. Okay, I've gotten about 70 pages in. We've had a lot happen already. So we know all about Feyi's past, the love of her life who died, and she's being kind of reckless, sleeping around, just living a life that makes her forget about her past. So she has this one guy who I thought was gonna be the guy. They were having sex in a bar at like the opening chapter of the book, and then she ends up going on a date, not really a date, with that guy's friend. So I don't know at this point if like it's going to be between the two guys, but it seems like it's not going to be. There's this one guy, Nasir, and he's very kind and gentle and understanding that she wants to take things slow. And she's caught pretty off guard that there's this guy who's willing to spend time with her without expecting like a relationship or even to sleep with her. So they're just hanging out, they're friends, but like more is about to happen, I'm sure. I don't know how much of the book is going to be spent like them pining, but I hope a while. Now he's just shared this opportunity with her about being featured in an art show. She's an artist. She's sharing her work with him and like opening up and being vulnerable, and it's all very precious. Precious and steamy. So we'll see how it goes. Respectfully, what the fuck is going on? I'm guessing this would be a spoiler, but she is into somebody else, and I'm very confused. Like, I don't understand where this is going. Halfway through a romance book, you're supposed to have a romantic relationship established, or at least the person who I'm supposed to root for at some point in the book should be established. Who is that person? Because I'm lost. I think at this point, Faye is just making poor decisions. Obviously, she's had a tough past, and she is reflecting on so many things. Like when she shows interest in somebody who she shouldn't, she is saying to herself, like, I'm only interested in this person because of this, this, and this. But then things just keep going, and she hasn't returned to the person who I think she's supposed to be with. I stopped mid-chapter to update you because I'm scared about where this scene is going. I'd like to put in a formal request that we get Joy's romance novel, because her as the best friend character, care about her a lot more. She's not even part of the plot, but I care about her romantic relationships more. And Joy's constantly saying everything that I'm thinking. She literally goes, these are a lot of high stakes. This whole relationship is coming with such high stakes. Like, is it really worth it? I want something so much less complicated for her, and Joy and I are just on the same page. She's trying to get her friend to leave and come back home. She told her this was a bad idea from day one. She calls her messy as fuck, and that's how I feel. Normally I can enjoy messy characters, but not today, and not in a romance. This is not what I want. This is not what I want. It's so wild to me because I could not have predicted this. I truly thought that I was saving the best for last. Like, I really thought, okay, we've had a mix of ratings here, but we've gotten a 5-star, and then we're gonna end with a 5-star. And I'm gonna get to say all of these things about how my romance journey is going so well. But now I have to come on the internet and tell you that I hated a romance? This is not a position I thought I would be in. The track record that I have with this author, more so than any other, is just the best. What do I even say now? I hate that the week is kicking off this way, because you also don't know what's to come after this, but I do. Now, to be fair, I didn't know what these books were, didn't know what they would contain. This was supposed to be an open-minded episode. I feel like I've learned some things. But first, I'm not gonna say my rating out loud, but I've given every rating under the sun. I'll try to keep it brief and just say I can objectively look at this and think, okay, this is a love story that people can appreciate. If you just look at Faye and what she's been through and what she wants out of life, I can be happy for her. This author continues to have stunning writing. The personal and thoughtful self-reflections they allow their characters to genuinely have throughout a story, it's stunning. The way they're allowed to talk about their feelings, the queerness involved in the story, the recovery, the self-reflection, I can appreciate it all. As a romance, it's absolutely not for me. The stakes were indeed too high. The progression, the speed in which the relationship developed, I did not like it. I didn't like the dynamic at all. I didn't like the way they spoke to each other. I didn't like how there was so much drama so fast. They were already saying like questionable things while in the midst of falling for each other. There was a character who I feel like was completely mishandled, and I'm going to be upset about that for a while. Now, a book that can accomplish making me feel anything that's a feat. Unfortunately, the feelings that I want to feel with a romance, it didn't give me that at all. Now, what have we learned by the end of this journey? Number one, I'm a rom-com girly. Oh boy, am I a rom-com girly. I just want people to be happy and having a nice time. The question of can I enjoy a romance? The answer is yes. The question of will I automatically give 5 stars to previous 5 stars? That's a no. Though it's nice coming back to an author's writing that I have established that I enjoy. I can't definitively say just based on 5 books if I like or dislike certain tropes, but at this point, I feel like I like Grumpy Sunshine. I like witty banter. I do like a tech element. I like a gimmick. I like forced proximity. And I don't think I love friends to lovers. I don't love an age gap, and I don't love a love triangle. And some of those revelations are a little surprising to me. Oh, and dream sequence sex scene. I feel like this is your mom on the internet talking about sex and you're probably all very uncomfortable. But I feel like at this point, I don't know that I would want to read a romance that doesn't have sex. And not many of these had cringy sex. So that was the biggest win of all. We definitely learned some things, and I feel like that's the #1 goal. We're gonna learn even more tomorrow. I hope you stick around. And I thought we'd play a little game. So knowing what you know now, if I showed you tomorrow's TBR, would you be able to predict which of these are gonna be my top rated reads and which are gonna be at the bottom? Go ahead and guess what my favorites will be in the comments below, and I'll see you over there. Bye.